Свети соколы орлами, полно горе горевать, то ли дело под шатрами, то ли лагерем стоять. Взвейтесь соколы орлами, полно горе горевать, то ли дело под шатрами, поле лагерем стоять. Там бел город полотняный, морем улицы шумят, под золотою румяной медные маковки горят. Там едва заря настанет, строй пехотный закипит, барабанова не погрянет и штыками заблестит. Там едва заря настанет, строй пехотный закипит, барабан не погрянет и штыками заблестит. Закипит тогда войною богатырская игра. Строй на строй пойдет стеною и прокатится ура. Светись соколы орлами, полно горе горевать, то ли дело под шатрами, то ли лагерем стоять. Взвейтесь соколы орлами, полно горе горевать, то ли дело под шатрами, поле лагерем стоять. Светись соколы орлами, полно горе горевать, то ли дело под шатрами, поле лагерем стоять. Взвейтесь соколы орлами, полно горе горевать, то ли дело под шатрами, поле лагерем стоять. Там бел город полотняный, морем улицы шумят, под золотою румяной медные маковки горят. Там едва заря настанет, строй пехотный закипит, барабанова не погрянет и штыками заблестит. Там едва заря настанет, строй пехотный закипит, барабан не погрянет и штыками заблестит. Закипит тогда войною богатырская игра. Строй на строй пойдет стеною и прокатится ура. Светись соколы орлами, полно горе горевать, то ли дело под шатрами.
Welcome to Volume 1.1 of solo drills in the Grappler's Toolbox entitled Elementary Biomechanics. Stored elastic energy, SEE, is the quality of our tissues to absorb, store, and release energy through minimal effort. This is the crux and cornerstone of biomechanical efficiency. The exercises contained in this volume will introduce you to the process of SEE and how this can enhance your game irrespective of style. As you've seen in the beginning through authentic footage from Russia, General Alexander Vertinsky created the ROSH training system as a means of performance enhancement for any martial art, combat sport, and any aspect of physical culture. Let's begin with our basic position, the squat. Same way you're going to be engaging this position, the same way you're going to be disengaging. Take your knees, point your feet out at a 45-degree angle, let your heels rise up, slowly decline until you're in a nice buoyant position. Now, the most important element is going to be that your spine is aligned at a perpendicular angle to the plane of the floor, or the plane of the mat, or the ground, depending on where you're training. Another key component is going to be in the placement of your heels. Right now, my heels are turned outward, which is causing me to fall backward. Turn your heels inward, pointing towards each other, and rest down on top. Backward, upward, towards each other. Up on the balls of your feet. The closer you bring these together, the more of a stable position you're going to have. And this is going to be the basis of all of your training breaks. When you're amidst your training and you need to take a break in between exercises, come back to this basic position so you keep your tendons and ligaments loaded. What happens in a great deal of activity is we tend to go into a moment of rest and we lose that loading capacity of our tissues. So take this as your basic position, and when you move from here, make sure you keep your head on top of your spine. Moving into the second position, take a half step outward, place your heels down on the ground, and let your rump swing forward towards your heels. Now, you can see the placement of the feet are still at a 45-degree angle. From the side, this is going to be an important component for most of the skill families that you're going to be accessing in any type of grappling game. This should be nice, light, and mobile. You can see how the outside toes, the foot swords, starts to raise as I keep this gentle. There should be no muscle keeping this structure intact. This is all loaded. Now, one of the most important components to this is that you need to relax. When you're going through the training drills throughout the course of this tape, however you implement them and into whatever wrestling style or grappling style you're working on, make certain that you're relaxed. This is going to be the essence of all of these drills is not in the development of skills, but that your body has the capacity to relax into whatever movement pattern you're adopting depending on your game. When you keep your pelvis light, you're going to have a great deal of mobility to move laterally. You can see that as you twist this, the knee can drop, and that's going to lead us into our third position. From here, you see a 45-degree angle from my torso, a 45-degree angle from my torso. This is nice and light and loaded. Foot's placed flat, L shape on the back leg. Now I'm going to give you another perspective here. L shape. Not here. Not here. What this is doing is it's engaging muscles in my feet, and those of you with experience on the mat know that the first thing to go are your hands and feet. The first thing that's going to fatigue, your hands and your feet. You need to conserve the energy there. It's the absolute utmost concern for conserving your energy. This should be nice and light. There should be no toes engaged and a nice form of an L. Now, if we just let the pelvis turn, it brings our leg back up. This is a standing position. We're engaged in the ground. This is a standing position. There's no awkward disengagement of ground, standing, ground, standing. It should be that buoyant and that light, no muscular effort involved. When you're working on this exercise, if you need to prepare for an event or prepare for your training program, when you're about to get into the technique aspect of your training, warm up the tendons and ligaments. Get the load preparation back and forth. Don't jam the side of your knee into the ground. Your patella will never be hitting. It'll never be hitting the mat because your heel's not up. Back and forth. Back and forth. Do this a few times. Keep light and loaded. You can see how right along the line between the 2 feet, the spine is straight downward. Line of force, straight. Foot, spine, foot. Relaxed. From this point, we'll move on. We're going to work now to get back to that second and third position from a standing position. Feet are still placed at a 45-degree angle. Let the knee gently drop down and into position. Switch to the opposite knee and bring yourself back to a standing position. This is going to be a nice fluid engagement in the ground. It's a nice drill to prepare for anytime you have to transition from a standing game to a ground game. Down, switch, standing. Down, switch, standing. Allow it to become nice and gentle, no strain, and relaxed. Most important element, relaxed. You can't see from this angle, but from this angle you can see that the spine needs to be aligned perpendicular to the ground each time. Keep relaxed. We're going to take that first and second position and now work it into a movement drill. What we'll do is we'll start from our squat. Now we're going to head directly off one angle of the knee. First position squat, take a half step until your heel is planted firmly on the ground. Weight transfer, now you're fully balanced onto this leg, no weight. Knees together, firm plant. Take the knee and rotate all the way through. Weight transfer, knees together, rotate the knee outward. When you get here, roll your shoulders back, open up and expand your chest. This is going to be a good exercise and relaxing. You want your whole body coordinated. All the way through. Work back and forth, up along the mat. Once you get comfortable, you can make this a nice soft creep so that you're not engaging your muscles. We know how to use our muscles to plow through a motion. Here, weight transfer, load the pelvis. Weight transfer, load the pelvis. Start off slowly and work up to it. In a second variant on the exercise, take your leg long. Work from the initial squat. Put your leg out, flat down. Turn your heel in. Now, just like the first variation of this exercise, rotate your knee out and weight transfer fluid like the second drill. Now, this is going to be a common position for us. From here, we have that first squat. Chest is back from the first exercise. 90 degree angle, heels flat on the mat. From here, what we have to do is, first exercise. Firm plant, straight out. Heel comes down, weight transfer, and extend and open up. Stretch out the pelvis. This is going to be our power base. So you want to have this nice and relaxed. Stretched and out. when you work back, make sure that this becomes fluid. Work back and forth along your mat. Get a good stretch. And working with those first two exercises, make sure that you use your hands just like training wheels. Your balance is going to increase as your sensitivity increases, as your relaxation increases. So keep using your hands to place in your balance holes where you're off balance. You know this from your grappling game, that wherever your stance is, you have a breach of stance integrity at a perpendicular angle. So just use your hands to balance through those holes until your body regains its natural sensitivity. On a third variation of the exercise, we'll start from this basic position of heels down. Now, we're going to rotate and load this under to balance. Place one hand long, one hand longer. Weight transfer. You remember this, we worked on this position earlier. One hand in the balance hole, one hand long. Now what we're going to work from here is letting the legs slide through to the second exercise. Do that again. First position, load, load. Now, right from here, all we're going to do is we're going to contract this in to that first position. Load, load, and back. We'll do it the other direction. Starting from here, this once again is increasing the coordination of your navigation of the mat. The more that you can negotiate in 3 dimensions, the greater your application of your skill base, no matter what skill family and no matter what grappling style. Fourth variation. We're going to get into this basic position again. Nice soft ground engagement. Controlled using your soft tissues. Now, you see from this position, if this balance point is loaded up the spine, all my weight transfer loaded along this line. There's nothing that's decreasing this friction coefficient. There's nothing that's inhibiting this leg from moving. So what we're going to do is we're going to go the opposite direction. Allow this to travel in a circle the opposite direction. You need this to be light. You need this to be light. You know through whatever game, whether it's submission or jacket wrestling, that a leg traveling has to have no resistance in it. If you try and muscle through an action, he has the ability to respond. So relax, relax. This is what this is going to do is it's going to increase the performance level of your technique families. Nice and soft. Take this exercise. When you get to this position, transfer, like we did in the first exercise. Transfer to the opposite side. We worked from here, transfer. Now, the more relaxed, the more fluid. Now you can take these variations, and what I suggest to my students and my athletes is that you take these and compose these on your own. These are your, like the video says, this is your toolbox. You take these and you compose these into a little melody of movement. Work on the variations. So far we have 4. Take these and start to thread them together and make them seamless. Okay, we're going to work back to the second position of the squat, and we're going to increase the articulation in our lower frame. First, work on your ground engagement softly. Now, the only thing that we're doing differently here is we're not placing this flat down. Don't slam this down into the ground at a 45-degree angle. Make it a gentle decline, inward and outward. You remember this position? Come back up and back down. What this is doing is it's counting more on the tendons and ligaments than on your muscle. The more muscles that you have to engage, the more energy you're expending throughout your training and throughout your practice. As you expend more energy during your training, your technical internalization, how much you can internalize about the techniques you're working on, decreases. You know about your gameplay that as your energy decreases, your performance decreases. So when you work on the mechanics through here, the softer and less energy you can expend, the better this is going to sew together your technical strategies, and the more it's going to conserve your energy. We're going to take this component a little bit further. As you engage the ground, wrap your toes underneath so your laces are exposed to the mat. Now, this is where a lot of people will make mistakes. So, carefully. Pelvis is going to come down, roll across the shin. Toes are wrapped underneath like you're hanging onto a branch upside down. Not that many of you do that. Wrap underneath, into position. How can you do this? Only by being relaxed. Some of you will say, well, my toes and my ankle is inflexible. No, it's not. The position is. What's keeping you from doing this is structure and relaxation. The circumference here to rotate. Look at this. What this is, it's a compromise of the joint integrity. Here, you don't want to do that. Here, no compromise. L, small cylinder, rotate. When you come back, pull the toes back towards the shin, standing position. Engage the ground, toes curl underneath, expose the laces, roll across the shin, relaxed. Back, pull the toes back towards the shin, standing position. Now what you want to do, take this exercise and work it alternating back and forth. One side, up, next side, up. So that this becomes very buoyant. The more that you can engage and disengage the ground, the greater your transition. What the biggest problem is for most athletes is the transition between these two games. A solid mechanical base of engaging and disengaging the ground is going to eliminate that gap. This is one of the components of why the Russian athletes, they excelled in their wrestling styles. Transition, weight transfer, standing. We're going to move from this ground engagement to here. Now watch what happens. You remember the leg swing that we did? The third variation earlier? Take that leg, swing comfortably into this position. I'm going to show you this from a different angle. Laces are still exposed to the mat. One more angle. One more angle. Starting from here. Now you see there's a flat angle here. Toes are pointed directly towards the patella of the opposite leg. One flat surface, one plane. Next plane. Third and fourth planes, you have to extrapolate. This is your balance hold, where your spine is placed. This is going to be an important mobility element on the ground. Nice and relaxed. Once again, down to the ground. This shin box is going to be a component of most of our biomechanical exercises. You're going to transition through this quite frequently because it's a position of mechanical advantage. You have a great deal of mobility and stability at the same time. Right from here. Now, what we're going to work on is disengaging the ground in the exact same frame that we engaged it. What we have to do is work here first and transitioning from one shin box to the next. Now, look what happens. Spine articulates, feet don't move. The feet are not moving at all. From one box to the next, keeping the planes flat. Each time. I'm sure a lot of you can see the applicability of this to whatever game. But working specifically on the movement between techniques is what's going to capture the attention of your opponent. The softness and the fluidity between those moments. Now, as we get to this point, what we're going to do, like I said earlier, is work on disengaging the ground in the same manner that we engaged it. So what we have to do is we have to take this foot and place it right here. We're first going to work on expanding the hips so that we lift and clear this leg. Now this leg will carry around and the inside, the instep, will come flat against the knee. Tight. Roll, heel gets placed down on the ground, standing position. Once again. By details. Shin box. Expand the pelvis, legs swooping, instep to the knee, rotate the heel down, pull the toes back towards the shin, knee comes up, standing position. We'll show that from a different angle. Open up the pelvis, leg swoop, instep, rotate the heel down, standing position. We're going to work on 2 more exercises involving the shin box specifically. First being how to travel and expand the pelvis so that we don't need to lift the pelvis off the mat in order to be mobile. An important element. From here, work on your pelvic expansion. Now what happens is when this leg swings out, we're going to start to turn it in and weight transfer. This is going to be difficult at first. Take your hands, use them as training wheels, because what you're going to do is do a double shin roll. Shin roll here, shin roll here. You remember this position. Shin roll, shin roll. Travels, shin roll. I'm turning around the other direction. Expand, leg swoops, starts to come in, travel across. Now, when you do this, make certain that your pelvis is loose. If you start to tighten up your muscles, if you try to power through these exercises, it's going to drain you. You have to stay loose, relax through the exercises. Don't think of these as some fitness standard that you have to accomplish, but a range of motion that you're trying to recover. Increase your sensitivity to it. Once you do, I want you to move on to the next exercise. Rising shin roll. Up. Drop into a shin box. Rising shin roll. Up. Drop into a shin box. And keep doing this in revolutions. I'll do this again. Engage the ground. Drop the opposite knee down. Swing around. And back to center. One final exercise in this block is going to be from a standing position and collapsing just the front leg into a 45-degree drop. Now, we worked from here, and you saw we were also working from here when we did that advancing shin roll. This time, this leg's going to keep planted, drop down, immediately come around for a rising shin roll. Now, some of you that have stalled throws, this is an excellent way to re-engage a standing position. If you get thrown and you can recover, right back up. You'll notice that some of these are great ways in themselves of engaging your techniques, getting to them, bridging it. Others are ways of making your techniques seamless in between. Drop down, right back up. You'll see a lot of unique Sambo tricks in Russian Sambo with these exercises because of the absence of a concept of technique in Sambo. But we'll get to that in another tape. We're going to move on to the next block of movement. And these biomechanical exercises, what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate the shin box. We drop down into the first half, fall into the second half. What this arm's going to do is screw up at a 45-degree angle. Right from here. From the shin box, there's your whole imbalance. Screw straight here. Now we have one more point. 1, 2, 3. 4 points will complete our static balance. Take your shoulder and roll back to your base. Bring your hands in the center. Now, as opposed to some techniques of falling, in ground engagement, you want the most efficient path where you have no trauma and you have no stunning effect from impacting the mat. So when you fall, what's going to happen eventually, it's going to be a soft transition. You're going to maintain control the whole way through. Some of you that are comfortable here, this is going to be a fantastic way for you to engage this position in a quick and efficient manner. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to really emphasize the shoulder roll in this motion. Most people, when they try to roll their shoulders, from too much athletics, they become stiff and rigid. Their shoulder rolls look like this. A shoulder roll has to be soft and independent of the rest of your body. This kind of plasticity is going to be absolutely integral to getting your techniques to congeal together and tweaking the effectiveness of them through your own body mechanics. Everyone's going to have their own unique way. You can work on those exercises at a later date, and there's going to be a separate program that we'll work on for just your joint mobility. We'll get back to that. When engaging the ground to the rear, if you fall straight down, shoulder roll instead of here, slamming into the ground. Roll, soft transition. Now at the beginning we worked from this shin box, switching shin box. From one side to the next. What we're going to do is we're going to pinch our knee, our elbow into our ribs. Keep this flat and screw up, getting back into your shin box base. Now we're going to do that on the opposite side. I'll give you an angle. As you collapse down, switch the shin box, tight in, and back up. Now, when we take that exercise, what we can do is, from engaging the ground, whether intentionally or unintentionally, we can add into our shin roll to disengage the ground, a rising shin roll. Backwards, switch the shins, and automatically come back up. Now, you'll have to work on coalescing those particular mechanics together on your own. Take these, it's a toolbox. Some tools work well together. And you want to put them together, and depending upon your game and your own physiology. Standing. Take that and work on it. One of the more challenging aspects of biomechanical exercises is once you understand the basis of loading your tissues, you're going to realize that you have a lot of explosive power. Now, we're not going to get into the sports science aspect of this, but I'm going to use this term quite frequently, and it's stored elastic energy, SEE. Stored elastic energy. When you load a tissue, like a tendon or a ligament, it's elastic. So as you stretch the rubber band, you gain potential energy. When you release it, it snaps. Now in this aspect, it's a good snap. You want to load these tendons and ligaments to augment your power. Shoulder roll, like we talked earlier. When you work on this exercise, try and break it down. Take your time. Don't get frustrated. This is not a technique you have to accomplish. This is a movement pattern which incorporates your technique base and your independent skill families. So I'll do the exercise and then we'll break it down by details. You'll do your rear ground engagement, switch, and up. You've loaded the largest ligament in your body, your iliofemoral. It's a huge rubber band. Engage, roll the shoulder, switch the shin box. I can't do it now. I can't. Why? Because it was the inertia created through that loading. You can only do it in motion. Now you can work on this. Take your hands and place them in the holes of your balance to allow your pelvis to be free to shift. When you have inertia, what happens is you have this buoyant raise that just rips you off of the mat to a standing position. This is not a skill that you can acquire. This is a sensitivity base that you have to recover. Now, we had this capability when we were kids, but for many reasons we've lost that ability. I'll do it one more time. Keep the inertia, manage the energy, and allow it to transfer. What we're going to do is we're going to take our rear ground engagement and work to that base. That base being, as you engage the ground, this base is going to be important for our mobility. However, without the full articulation of our joints, we're not going to be able to move very far, especially when there's the pressure of another one or two forms on top of us. First thing that's going to be crucial, you may have hip mobility, but you don't have torso mobility. That's going to come from these tank tracks, your shoulders. The full articulation of your shoulders is going to allow a great deal of movement. Work on these exercises. Try and increase the relaxation in your shoulders. Most people, especially with pre-competitive anxiety, the anxiety you get just from going to training when you know you're going to get thumped for a few hours, that starts to embed into your tissues. And you carry that stress in your neck and back, and that significantly decreases your performance level. So please, please, please work on the suppleness of your shoulders. It's the absolute crux and cornerstone of all of your ground mobility, your solar plexus. Come back to a shin box. What we're going to do is work on some mat navigation. To negotiate the mat in an efficient manner, let's first start on taking this shin box and swinging our leg gain exercise, we're going to do that close to the mat. This leg is going to come long. Now what happens is, if this elbow is pinched in, this cylinder, I'm giving you this angle first, this cylinder is very compact, right here. If this comes around, switching the shin box, we're in our base. From here to base. Here to base. We're going to come right down into this position, sewing together some of our previous skills. Let's go through this by details. What we're going to do, 45 degree on the feet, 45 degree downward, long leg, reverse, elbow pinched, short cylinder, switch the shin box, base. I'm going to go the opposite direction just to accentuate this. Bring the elbow to the knee, expand the hip downward. This is going to be your motion. Here, you need to pop the pelvis and roll the shoulder down to the mat. If you try and keep your, like a Lincoln log, how many of you have gotten stuck here with 200 pounds on top of you, or more? Shoulder has to come down to the mat, leg long. Now, just for the purpose of this exercise, we'll do a rising shin box, or a rising shin roll to come up. Same thing in reverse. Decline, cylinder, shin box, switch, base, rising roll. And work this throughout your training regimen of movement softly. Keep nice and fluid so that you can transition. Your transitionary movement capabilities are what sew your techniques together, regardless of your grappling style. Another perspective on this. You need this to be a soft transition, but your leg has to pump. It has to reach long so it loads the pelvis. Long. The longer it loads, the easier the transition is going to be to come upward. I'll give you another perspective. Shoulder to the mat. Load the leg and up. One more time. Shoulder to the mat. Shin box switch. Shoulder to the mat and up. Variation on the exercise. We went from this long leg roll. We're going to switch this to a high leg roll. I'm going to give you a couple different perspectives. The first is, from here, keep this tight. What we're going to do is shift the pelvis to the ground first. Here. Leg across. Just at the knees. Keep your knees to your chest. Knees to your chest. Now work this exercise. One side and down the other. Most important aspect is going to be that all of the torque comes from this motion here at the knee. The elevation and depression of your femoral joint and the looseness and suppleness of your knee. At the end of the tape, what you're going to see is some athletes composing these exercises and putting them together in a fluid sequence. They'll be improvising them like you should. But right now we're going to move on to a different exercise. This exercise, I've heard from grapplers the next day in training that this has revolutionized some of their movement patterns. It's called leg threading. When we work from this base, this cylinder, if you need to get to a prone position or from a prone to a supinate position, you need to decrease the size of your cylinder. If you roll like a log, all of that room, you're not going to have another player. Efficient movement is going to be decreasing the size of the cylinder so that you can roll in place. And from a prone position, to a supinate. Okay, by details, leg threading. Why? Here's the needle hole. This has to go through. Now, you cannot do this if your hips are tight. You won't be able to. It's got to be dependent on your relaxation level. Second thing, those of you have trouble raising your shoulders, your arms above your head, this is going to be a serious detriment. Work on your flexibility and your range of motion. Work on it. It's going to be integral to the technical content of your game. Take this arm high, thread the leg through. Bring your elbow out, slide the opposite arm to this position. Opposite direction. Bring around, take your elbow to your knee, and come through. Once again, arm high, leg thread, face down, face up. It can be that fluid if you relax. Now, traveling, you can negotiate the ground fluidly if you increase the range of motion in your joints. Like I said, later on, you'll see some sportsmen demonstrating this in simple compositions and complex compositions, but it'll give you a better idea. We'll change the environment, and it'll give you a better feel of how movement is affected by contour. Some of you aged folk will remember the break dancing days. I'm much too young to remember that, just so you know. One of the main components of dance moves is efficient biomechanical movement. Now, you're going to see a lot of dance-like elements, especially breakdance elements, and one of the histories of Russian style is a martial tradition, which in translated into English was breakdown happy dance. Who knows? Might have been one of the progenitors of breakdancing in the modern era. However, taking this exercise, what we'll work on is working from this base. We're going to have a bit of a complex shin box switch. Leg comes long, switches the shin box. Leg long, switches the shin box. If you try and come here, stretch submission, you'll be doing it to yourself. How many tears and pulls do we see from this position? Switch the shin box, allow the pelvis to roll. As you get more and more comfortable with it, some of you are already familiar with this component. Shin box. Shin box. It should become really fluid. You should start composing the previous exercises together and start to connect into it your technique base. Now you'll see what happens if the pelvis or the lunar plexus needs to be mobile. You need to stabilize the solar plexus and free the lunar plexus. This becomes a point of rotation on the ground. You can't do this. Don't lock both centers of gravity to the mat. Just one. If this one's locked, this one's free. If this one's locked, the solar plexus is locked, the pelvis is free. Now obviously you can see, we're back to here. You can start to compose these together. And once you have this little melody of movement, you can see how this is going to increase your performance dramatically. Now, when we take this exercise and we add into it the previous of threading, leg threading, leg swoop, big one, ground, shin box, 45-degree shoulder roll, free the lunar plexus. Now, leg thread, arm high, stomach, opposite side. Work on the simple motor components and start to put them together into complex biomechanical sets. I'll do it a little more fluidly. You can see how, where the dance component that we've seen. Once again, shouldn't be energy expenditure. Should not be expending energy because it's based on inertia, stored elastic energy, relaxation. Throughout the course of your exercises, what you're going to need to do is have the proper respiration to coordinate with your movement. One of the things that you'll hear on our breathing tape of the Roche training system is that respiration happens because of movement. How you move your body determines your respiration. You can't have very deep breaths when you're constricted on yourself. You wouldn't see very many opera singers like this. They need to open up and expand their chest. When you're moving through the course of the exercises, try and coordinate your respiration, or better yet, get yourself a copy of the respiration tape from the Roche training system. The next exercise block we can call spinal rocks, and the reason is because of the articulation of the spine. When we work from this base, we need to expand the pelvis and drive the body straight upward. Then allow it to collapse in on itself. The most important component is that each vertebrae acts independently and absorbs motion. Each vertebrae at a time. Respiration. Expand it open and drive the pelvis forward. This really gives you a lot of inertia to power up from a prone position, an inverted position, or a seated position, like I am now. Inverted, seated. You drive through it, and it'll connect your techniques, your skill families. Most of the problems you're going to have initially will be with the pelvis. Don't try and launch over top of you. Seat your solar plexus into the ground. Drive this straight into the ground, so you should have open it up. That's the basic position. Next element. What we're going to do is incorporate some ballistic stretches. These are not static stretches, they're dynamic range. Don't fly through them, but keep them in motion. If you want to have flexibility in motion, you've got to stretch in motion. You cannot incorporate static stretches with movement capability. We'll get to one of these elements later. Straight up, straight forward. I'll give you a better perspective. Breathe and roll the spine out. Drive the legs straight up. be ramrod straight each time. Drive it up, because the hip motion, that power that you're going to be generating, may not be even on the ground. It translates in all of your activities, your ability to burst through emotion, that explosiveness. Dynamic stretch once again. This time we're going to take this into what's conventionally called a hurdler stretch, but it's not a static stretch. It's not a static stretch. Leg's going to split at the top. Continue straight down. Box. Straight. The leg that's going backwards is the leg that's contracting. Okay? Now we're going to switch this. To the opposite side. This is going to be a little bit of coordination on your own part. Take your time, don't get frustrated. Your ability to perform is in indirect proportion to your frustration level. So relax, relax. Stretching both at the same time. What you want to do is make sure that your objective isn't to travel through an isolated range of motion, but through the range of motion of the joint. Isolated range of motion, hyperextension, hypercontraction, range of motion. Okay? Well, we'll work on details later. Next exercise, legs come out. They're not kicking straight back. They're kicking out at 45-degree angles in a crescent. Now, second component of this exercise, don't forget the angle on those kicks. The second component is this straddle. Now, some of you can sit down completely straddled on your own. But what you want to do is have the power, the elasticity, generating back force from this. So, in motion, stretch in motion. Back, forward. Each time. Relax through the exercise.